to the younger generation, and my nephew has a lot of friends. So I'm always constantly talking 18, 19 year olds and everything else. One thing I've noticed is there's nothing that's driving them to go on to that next level.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like for me, I knew the drive for me was gonna be the military because that was set in stone for me. Like that was gonna be my next going to. School was gonna be my next set in stone because that was driving me to get it done, get the diploma, get the degree. The 20 years of service that I did, that what drove me too was the 20 years I knew I was gonna be in for the long run and everything else. Why do you think people lack a drive? Like what's in it that they don't see? Or let me ask you this: at 18, did you have a drive? Like you were like, "Yo, I'm gonna do this or do that," or did you get a drive now that you're older and you're like what drives you now compared to what you were being driven off before?
Man, what drives me right now is to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that when I have a great grandkid, that we look back and we talk about my life, and they're so far removed from the idea of being poor that they can't even fucking fathom for the second that there was a time where we didn't have hot water, because they don't know what that ever like. The idea that the electricity got turned off, and we just sat there sitting there saying like we had to make a decision. It's either hot water, it's electricity, or it's this, and we had to actually choose one. Like there was one
Wow.
we didn't like. There was one that had to get chosen as like that's not it. I want that to be so like at the idea of being like, how could you not do that? The idea of sitting there saying, why didn't you create a business? Like, there's so many things where it's like, hey, why don't we create a business because like we're paying for that shit? So why don't we just make a business and pay our own selves? Like, that's what I want to be where we're at as a family. To be like the idea that we would never even would have thought that. The idea my mom would have never would have been like that. We don't have money. We were lived on food stamps and shit. There was no dad involved. Like all that shit. I want it to be so far removed, but I want them to know, hey, this is where we came from. But at the same time, they're so far removed. Like they can't even ideally imagine that that was how life was for us as a family. So that's what
Right.
like I wake up in the morning and I'm driven, like, and I mean driven, like I'm fucking running, sitting there saying like I am driven to be the best that I can be, because I know it doesn't affect me. I'm thinking about great grandkids right now. And so I think
Yeah.
with that shit, if you're driven like that, you can't, like, honestly, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but you can't fucking compete with me at that level. If I'm over here thinking about a great grandkid right now and what kind of like life I'm living and what I'm gonna tell him and where we're living at, and
Yeah.
I think the reason why you don't find that many people like that, it's fucking psycho, right? Like the idea of me walking around being like, I'm gonna have a great grandkid, and I got to do these things for these people and shit like that. Do you know how like, and honestly, because of the way I do those things, it comes at a cost. There's no fucking friends over here at the house. There's no like, let's go hang out on a Friday night. There's no let's go do that shit. It's like, let's go do these things. No, it's like, let's read a book. Hey, let's are we going to talk about finances? Are we going to talk about a business? Are we going to talk about plans to strategies for tax? Like those things. And if the answer is no, guess what, homie? I hate to say it, but we have nothing to talk about. And so I think the reason why people are not driven is because the shit's fucking exhausting, man. It's a lonely fucking road.
Yeah. But I would think that if you knew that the outcome was going to be rewarding, that you knew that it was hopefully going to end to where, like you said, your grandkids will never have to deal with the choose between electricity, hot water, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why won't you start at an early age to be driven? Like, why didn't you let growing up poor drive you at 18 to be like, I'm going to be more than this?
Because honestly, I thought I was a victim. To me, being poor, like now I look at being poor sitting and saying I have an edge, right? Because I was poor. Back then, I didn't think like I had an advantage. I got a gift, man. I was poor. I know what it's like to be poor. I looked at it as like poor me, right? My dad wasn't in my life, poor me. Man, my mom, I didn't grow up with these rich life, poor me. Like I went into the military because poor me, honestly, and like I didn't have a future. Why? Because I didn't care about school. I didn't care about anything else. I was angry. I had no discipline. And in the military, there was somebody who put a foot up my ass, who could care less who I was. I wasn't special. I was just another person
Right.
in line. I went by my last name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where I think that's why a lot of people that are not driven is because like, what example do you even have of what driven is? Because it comes at a cost, right? Like my daughter has an idea what driven is, and she may not want to be driven because there's a lot of time where she has to sit there and say, hey, are you going to come to this? I'm like, hey, look, work will never come before you. But she still has to ask that question. So she still thinks in her mind, there might be a chance I'm working. And that sucks, right? By the same time frame, that's what happens when you're driven. There's a cost. And so I think when people are not driven, it's like, why not? It's like, because it fucking costs you something. And I don't think people are prepared to give that up.
So do you think because now we're sort of well off, like we're not poor, we're not choosing what to have on or turned off, like we're at a level to where we're okay, we're sufficient. Now that you're providing your kids with that great sufficiency versus, hey, are we gonna have the electricity, the hot water, the gas? Which one are you gonna choose? Do you feel like that takes away from them having a drive? Because I'll give you this out, like, again, the younger generation, it just seems like and I've heard this from siblings, is like they want to make sure they give their kids what they didn't have when they were young. You know what I'm saying? And I see that. I understand. You know, we were poor. Dude, there were times we didn't have hot water, so my mom would put water up in a pot, put it on the stove, heat it up, and go in the bathtub and pour that shit on you, but you got to take a quick shower. Sometimes the cold water will run, and I'll be running real quick. You got to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But now it's like, they are like, we're not going to put our children through that. Mm-hmm. Like, if we're able to work and make decent money and build upon what we had to deal with in the past, we're not going to let our kids understand that. But do you think that would take away from them having the drive? Do you feel like not understanding the poorness, the being humbled because you didn't have it tough or anything like that, that you don't think that would take away from them being driven to be like, I want more? Or do you think they'll get too complacent and be like, this is what life is because I got 2 houses, I got 2 cars, so I don't need to drive to go further than this because this is it.
Mm-hmm. I think the only way you don't let that happen is you raise the fucking standards, right? You sit there and say like, hey, this was my standard growing up, but we were poor. You fucker do not have this problem, so the standards are higher, right? So like I tell my daughter sometimes, I'll be like, no, you will not act this way. We have a higher standard. You will not disappoint the family this way. Like, she's under stress in a sense to produce a certain way. I think that's what you have to do, man. I think you have to sit there and say, like, I don't want you to ever experience what it's like to be poor, but because of that, the standards have now just gone up. Because you don't have to know what it's like to be poor, the standards have now gone up, and you have to understand that the level of succession has to be higher. I've always thought about it like, I have a bachelor's degree, right? Now if my daughter gets anything below a bachelor's degree, you have gone below. And I don't necessarily say that word for word because, like, I don't necessarily agree because, like trade jobs, having a business, etc. But what I'm trying to sit there and say is there's a level of a standard that we have in this family now. Okay, cool. You don't want to get a degree? Well, you better have a job. But more importantly, you better have a business, right? I got my first business when I was in my 30s. I'm now sitting there saying the new standard is instead of you having a car, we want you to have your first property and have your first business when you're a teenager because I want you to know what it's like. You know what I mean? And I think that's a little bit different because if you're doing that, you're like, Jesus Christ, man, like that's a very hardcore or that's very a lot. It's like, well, no shit. The stakes have risen, man. Like if we want the people to be better, the reason why these kids act away a lot of this shit is because their parents' standard for living is right here. And they're looking at their kids saying, like, why the fuck don't you have any drive? It's like, because there's no, like, to them, they're good. And then also that the parent is good right here. They're not trying to get better. And so I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of people is if you look at the parents, the kid is doing the same thing. If the parents are sitting there chilling and they're working out and they're good and Saturday and Sunday is their day of rest, well, then the kid's going to sit there and say, like, well, I'm good. I only have to achieve so much anyways. You didn't even raise a standard for me. Now I don't have no standard. So now I don't know how to even go higher. 2, I don't have any like perception of what it's like to really be hard to understand that life. And so I think that's really, this is something I deal with a lot because I'm always wondering about this, but I think that's what it is. I think it's a level of a standard that you're risen to. And I think that's why when we go, if we look back at the military, the reason why a lot of us did better when we first got in and those things, because there was a fucking standard. And there was somebody who was sitting there saying, all right, we're going to hold you accountable at this standard. And then it became to, at least when I was in and, been in the civil engineers, it was like, hey, our standard isn't no longer meets a standard. Our standard is above, we exceed the standard. That is now the new standard. And you're like, holy shit, man. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, you get to a point where you start raising the standards. Either people are going to rise to them or they don't. But if they don't rise to them, you have to coach them through that, and you have to help them to like get up to that. And so I think a lot of that stuff is these fucking kids, they have no desire, but it's also because they're looking at their parents and sitting there saying, you don't have no fucking desire. So why the fuck would I even, why would I try to achieve anything when you're not really achieving it?
Yeah. And it's crazy because it's the saying of set the example, be the example. You know what I'm saying? It's true to the word, because they will follow suit. So if you're going out there and, like you said, you increase the expectation to, you want them to do better than what you were doing, and be an extra 3-5 levels above you, then you have to showcase that. Mm-hmm. Because right now I feel like, my opinion, I feel like a lot of parents nowadays, their ultimate goal is just for them to finish high school. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing, I don't see any follow-up behind that. Like, mm-hmm. It's okay, you want them to graduate high school, but then what's from there? Okay, I understand maybe you want to do college, but then what's from there? Because sometimes parents would be like, figure it out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, after 18, you got to figure that shit out. I don't know how many times I've seen parents be like, yo, you're a junior now. You got another year left. What the fuck are you going to do after that?
Right.
You know, what are your plans? What's going on? And I feel bad, too, for these kids whose parents are, like, from third world countries, that they don't have an understanding of what should be more.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The fact that they made it to America and making a life for themselves in America is big for them.
Yeah.
But what can they honestly tell their kids that's going to succeed what they made? You know, so a lot of these kids is like, mom and dad only speak in Spanish. So all they look at me is they tell me, how you doing in school? I'm doing good. And they take the word for it. Mm-hmm. No parents say, let me see your report card. Let me see your progress report. Let me see this and that. Their parents are just like, okay, you know, as long as you graduate, then I did my job.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I seen that shutdown too. It's like, once you get the diploma, my hands are done, bro. Now you got to fucking figure life out. Like, what are you going to do? And unfortunately, it sucks because a lot of these kids, and I'll be honest, like, I always tell them, hey, dude, if worst comes to worst, join the military.
Yeah.
If you can't see yourself doing college or getting a job and doing what you want to do, you have no plan. Like, you don't have no way that you're going to advance your life. Join the military, man, because it will help. And you'll get some structure. You'll get, you know, some certification. You get a skill set and everything else. Even if it's for 4 years, 6 years, whatever the case may be. But the security is there. But now you're independent. You're learning to be on your own. You're not worried about mommy and daddy anymore. And plus, who knows if mommy and daddy can really help you out, because they're probably struggling themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I feel like sometimes it's tough, because I feel like when I speak to them, it's like you don't see the ambition. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't see the, I'm going to get this. You know, after I graduate, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. I want to do that. That drive is like non-existent, man, until you got to actually slap them in the back of the head and be like, dude, get your shit together. You need to do something with yourself.
Right.
You know?
Well, also, too, like, you know, I think it goes back a lot on the parents, man. Like, if you're coming from a third world country, across the border, whatever have you, you know, like, if I look at my grandpa, a lot of times as an example of, like, where I'm at, right? I'm his grandkid, where his great-grandkid's at. And so I try to use that as an example because that's what I can have as a frame of reference. For him, right, where me going into the military was a big deal, right? But it's also because it exists in their level of what they think is a possibility. If you think that you going to college is actually achieving the most you can ever achieve, your kid will fucking think so too as well. Right? Because you have put that limitation inside your own, like, limitation of your imagination has gone onto your kid too as well. So they think because they're already at college, they've already achieved where they're at. They have no idea where it's at. And so I think a lot of it goes back to parents. A lot of these kids are a reflection of their parents in a sense, right? We've always heard those things, a reflection of most people. Well, for how many years did you spend around your parents? How many times were you sitting around like, let's go have a goal session. Let's have a vision board. Like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, like, what are you doing right now? Oh, I'm writing my goals. What is that? Let's talk about your goal settings. Like, there comes a point, and I know it's like based off of age. It's hard to tell an 8-year-old about goals, but they're going to do exactly what they see. And if they see their parent doing exactly right here, and they sit there and say like, hey, if you go just above me a little bit, you have made it, right? And so that's true. And so, and like, you could sit there and say like, well, we take this further. Let's say my mother had associates. I have a bachelor's. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. but there's more because it has to sit there. There had to be something else extra, and that was the military that kind of like I had to get exposed to something completely different, so that way my mind and my imagination of what's possible can change. Even now, you know, having these conversations I having about finance with people, it changes because of the conversation, the information I've read, and so now I'm exposed to new people with new information, and now I'm able to sit there and say like, man, I never thought about it last year. And now I'm thinking about it. Hey, how about next year? How about we become our own bank and pay ourselves a 4% interest? And you know, you start like, holy shit, that's different, right? So it's I think a lot of it is the parent of what they expose their kid to and what is a possibility. And so I think that's the biggest problem right now is that parents themselves aren't achieving shit, and so their kids are not going to achieve shit, and it's just a direct reflection of you. However, it just took 10, 15 years for you to realize that you were also nothing. Your kid will also be nothing. But that's really true. Like, real talk. Like, you know, like like if you see someone and you're like, man, you're crazy, and you look at the parent and be like, that's your fuck up though, man. You fucked up. It just took 15 years for you to realize you fucked up as a parent. That's a dangerous thing about being a parent is you honestly don't know what you're doing, and you're raising a kid, and to the fact that it could take 10 to 15 years to figure out if you were raising that kid wrong. Like, if you give that kid everything they want, that's cool. But 20, 25, 30, they are fucked right now. And it's your fault because you gave them everything they wanted up till they were like 15 or so, let's say. You have fucked them over. And now it's going to take 10 to 15 years, maybe even longer. Because, you know, that guy who's 40 who lives with his parents, you look at him now and say you're a failure. But it's like, no, you look at his parents when he was 10 years old and sit there and say, hey, you're going down a really dark path. That's going to cause your ass for this little fucker to be in your basement when he's 30, 40. You know, and 50, and ain't nobody loving this fucker but his mama because he's a piece of shit. You know what I mean? He's just...
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I actually know someone back in New York. Unto this day, I could go back to my old building that I grew up in, and he's still in the same apartment with his mom. That is, God forbid, if his mom is still alive, but I think she is. But he's still there. No kids, no wife, no not in the same room. In the same apartment room bedroom that he grew up in, and everything, and the dude is still there. He's probably going on to his 60s. He's probably in the early 50s or whatnot. But you see that, man, and it's crazy that it happens. But I also noticed that I don't see parents like providing those feedbacks with their kid, like, why don't you want them to be working all the time? You know what I'm saying? Like, why don't you do this with your money? Like, why are you spending your money here? Why you're not having your own bank account and stuff? Like, I don't see the exchanges happening. You know what I'm saying? All they see is like, yo, dad's working 15 hours. That means he's not going to be home at this time, so I get to play till this time. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just the sneak arounds out it. But then I don't see the parents come back to be like, hey, yeah, I work 15 hours, but this is what you can do to not be like this, where you're not working 15 hours. Why don't you try to do this, do that? You know, work here, work there, get a part-time here, part-time there, save your money, build your money up, things like that. You don't see those dialogues happening anymore, man. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's just like, graduate high school. If you go to college, good. If you don't, you got to figure it out. If you do go to college, you graduate, you got to figure it out. Hopefully, you land a good job. Like, it's just like, I just need to wash my hands already with you, man. You know what I'm saying? I carried you to 18 years. That was my job as the parent. Now that you're 18, you're an adult. You need to figure that shit out. And I think it's kind of jacked up. But I knew at 18 I was going into service. So I didn't, you know, my mom said she washed her hands with me. I was okay with it because I was already enlisting. But at the same time, I feel bad for these kids, man, because again, I feel like the dialogues are not happening from freshman to senior. It's just like yelling because you're doing bad in school. Or, hey, let me reward you with a video game because you're doing good in school. But what else is beyond that? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? There's no other dialogues besides just make sure you're fucking passing class, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. And it's shitty, too, because then it's like when you meet them and you ask them, like, what's your dreams? What's your ambitions? They're clueless. They just look at you like, they give you that shoulder shrug like, well, I don't know.
You know, a lot of that stuff is because, like, again, like, you know, if you don't know what that is, right, you have to have somebody show you an example. And then you go to your parent and you would sit there and say, like, if you were to continue to exercise, you'd be like, hey, what is your parents' goals? What's their ambition? Right. You're going to be like, I don't know. Maybe he wants to, like go live somewhere else because my mom kills him. Like, he's destroying. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how people think in those little things. So I think a lot of times And the reason why I keep going back to the parent is because I'm a parent and I want to make sure that it's my responsibility. Like my kid is going to be what I
Right.
like, what I do. So I need to
Right.
make sure that I'm spending time with my kid and explaining. Like it's cool to work. It's cool to work your ass off, but if you're not talking to your kid and sitting there saying like, "Hey, let me talk to you on some real shit here," like as like a mentor, right? Like
Right.
shit, how many parents are not mentors to their own kids? Like if you were to ask that conversation, that shit, man, like that'd be a rough conversation to anybody. If you sit there and say like,
Oh
"Hey,
yeah.
are you best friends? Or are you a mentor to your child?" And they'll be like, "What do you mean?" And it's like that's a fucking problem. If you're not a
Yeah.
mentor, you're not guiding this fucker down the right path. This motherfucker is going to be either a serial fucking killer, alone in his basement, and ain't nobody fucking him but himself, or
Yeah.
like he's just going to be another zombie citizen and sitting there and will not be remembered for shit. Won't do
Yeah.
anything really. So I think a lot of it times if you talk to a kid and you talk to them, sit there and say like, "Hey, does your parents sit you down and talk to you about life and how to restructure and and you could ask them the things around it, but you instead of sitting there and saying, "Hey, they're a mentor, like, are they doing this with you?" And I think the answer
Yeah.
is probably no. Like it's hard, man.
Yeah.
Shit, when my 13-year-old, she doesn't even understand English, so it's hard. I'm trying to get to that point where we can have those conversations, and I'm dealing with that too. So, but like I said, a lot of these times, man, some of these kids, you look at them and you look at their parent, and then you look at that parent's parent. Like if I look at my mom's dad, right, my grandpa, I can understand where she came from. I can understand the way she raised
Yeah.
me because she thought that was the, like,
That was the right way.
yeah, homeboy was never around. He was providing deal, like, so
Yeah.
it was cool. So you didn't have that,
Yeah.
right? And like I can look at my grandpa, and I respect him. Again, he crossed the border. He's an immigrant. Without him, I don't have any of this shit. Without him having
Right.
the balls, the audacity, the adventure, whatever, to cross the border, I don't have. I never joined the military. And I never go to Japan and have my kids. I don't meet my wife and those things. So I'm very grateful. But I can still look at him and still see fault where he was in. So then saying like, oh, that's where you failed at as a parent, right? I can look at that and sit there and say like, that's where you failed as a parent. But that mistake led over to me. Like that directly affected me because of that failure. I almost had some issues. And if I didn't take any personal accountability, sitting there and saying like, hey, don't matter who taught you what, you are now an adult, so you're not responsible for yourself. Shit, man, I have, I start looking around and you sit there and say like, damn, man, my life could have been a lot different, right? Because of where, I mean, shit, my mom babied me. Like nothing was ever my fault. So imagine being 18 years old and technically nothing's really your fault. It's always somebody else's like, kid's fault.
Right.
How fucking dangerous is that shit as a 30-year-old? And you're sitting around like, it ain't my fault, man. Like my boss fired me. Like, well, hey, fucker, you were late. You were lazy. You were, what I mean? Whatever.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, man, my boss is a dick, man. It's just like they don't pay me enough to care or whatever. That for me is a very real concept of sitting there saying like, I wake up every day and I work my ass off and da da da, and that, or it could have been somewhere going in, checking in, and being like, I got this job, man, and like, yeah, my boss sucks, and I mean, but it's that thing is like, you zagged when you zag type thing. But like I said, I look at the parents, and then you look at the parents'
Yeah.
parents, and you're like, oh, it makes sense. Makes sense why you kind of
Yeah. And
total fuck up.
it's gonna get tougher now because look at the way the mothers and the fathers who they are.
Yeah.
They're 14, 15-year olds. You know what I'm saying? Young fucking parents having kids having kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And if you're not already on top of your kid trying to teach your kid now, hoping that they graduate high school, go to college and everything else, and then they turn around and be like, "Hey, ma, I'm gonna have a baby." What the fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That just makes it a whole lot tougher. The one thing I do notice is like this younger generation, they so badly want to get out of the house. Like they're like, dude, I'm tired of mom and dad's rules. I'm tired of this and this and that. I'm tired of this and that. And it's like, I get it, but you live there. You know what I'm saying? Number one, hardly any of you are paying any bills. Not even your own fucking cell phone bill. The parents are covering everything, but yet you want to leave. How you gonna do that? Oh, I'll get an apartment. How you gonna do that? No path, no nothing. It's just like this is what I want to do. In my dreams, I see myself doing A, B, and C and D, but there is no how you gonna connect the dots. You know what I'm saying? So then they're like, "Fuck, I hate being at home," but what can you do about it? You're not trying, and you're not making any attempts to try to change that or do something about it, so you can live by yourself. You can get an apartment. You can. Oh, I'm gonna have a roommate. Okay, got it. But then at the same token, is your roommate responsible enough? Is he gonna cover his end of the fucking bargain? You know what I'm saying? Is he gonna be there? Is he reliable? Can you trust him to be able to handle the bills with you? Because God forbid if both of you guys get fired, then what's gonna happen? Guess where you're going back to? Hey, mom, dad, can you let me fucking back in?
Right.
Then you're gonna be that fucking 50-year-old guy still living with his fucking mom because you just didn't want to get away. And like you said, because of the parents.
Yeah, I mean that's really it. A lot of it, I think, a lot of times is it's you know, like this, like today's society is like it's really, really, it seems like it's really against men, and I mean men. I don't mean like you gotta like spit on your hand and you're like, no, I got this shit, or like there's a flat tire, okay, I can fix it, or let me hear your engine, oh, I know exactly what's wrong. Like that's, I don't think, you know, not that. But what I mean is like a man being a man and standing up for what he believes in and working and actually allowing the woman, the wife, to actually be loving, caring, nurturing, and those things, so a kid can get well versed, right? You know, like, and if you have a dad and they're just kind of checked out and they're not being a man, they let their wife walk all over them. They're unhappy, so they don't really care. They're not taking care of their bodies or not doing that stuff. As a man, as a young man looking at that, that's your example of a man. Like, I don't blame you, right? Because you don't sit there and say like, well, what do you have? You really don't have it. And the only reason why I think I was able to learn what a man is because I never had a father. So I had to read a lot of books and I had to start like putting together my kind of ideal dad in a sense to learn from them. And so it was just a lot of books and just putting that person together and sitting there and saying like, okay, I think this is what a man is. I am now going to act as of this is what I think a man is. I will represent that. And that's all. That's really what I did. I just had to read books from different men and kind of gathered it together, read some other ones, but like, I don't really like that. I like this idea. I like this, you know, let me take it here to the point where I'm showing my daughter, this is what a man is, right? So the chances of my daughter marrying somebody like me are very high, right? Because I'm her father. She loves me and those things. Well, it's the same way if you look at it from another point of view. You know, you look at a young man, his mom picked somebody close to her dad, right? And if her husband is now like lazy, doesn't really do much, that just tells you that this wasn't even a generation issue this year or this generation. We're talking about 2 or 3 generations ago where this was a big problem, but it never got solved, and we just continuously went downhill. Where, you know, like they always say, you know, like, you know, weak men make hard times, and you know then the whole cycle starts all over again. You know, hard men make good times, et cetera, or good times and good time. You know what I mean? So there's that whole thing, but I think it starts with that shit, man. We're talking about, we're dealing with an issue that's from Vietnam issue, where a lot of men that went to war and didn't come back, or even more importantly, we're talking about Vietnam, man. We're talking about Vietnam where people, the greatest generation, World War II, they signed up and went and did what they had to do for America. Vietnam, they're trying to, now we have draft dodgers, right? Now, imagine we don't even have a draft anymore. Like we just went here to fucking here. Like there's, if you had a draft right now, people would probably shit them fucking selves and do whatever they had to do to not be part of the draft. And it wouldn't even be like, we have a category for these people. It would be like, we have a category for the ones who are willing to fight for their country, because it's just how shit is now.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean, and I just feel like the evolution of the generations to come is just going to be so much harder, so much tougher. And it's just like my great niece turning 1. I just don't see how easy it's going to get when she's 18. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's just going to be so much, not worse, but it's going to be a lot more difficult, because society itself is, I don't know. It's like that movie Idiocracy. You ever seen that? Mm-hmm. Where the only person who was smart was because he had common sense, but the rest of the world was dumb. Like they just lost their common sense. So he was like voted. They picked him as the president and everything else because he was doing simple things. He was like, I don't think there's a part of the movie, but it's like this guy's trying to break a rope, and even though he has scissors there, he won't use the scissors. He's just gonna try to fucking use his strength to break the rope. Yeah. And the guy would come up and take the scissors and just cut it, and blew his mind. Like he's like, oh my god, is that easy? Is that simple? Yes, again. But I think it falls back to being driven. You know, your child sees that you're the type of dad that's, you know, wants more, sets the standards, sets the expectations. So that's going to cause that drive within them to be like, I need to do more. Let me do more. Because God forbid something happens to where you're not alive tomorrow. At least you already started setting the steps for your kids to know what to go from there, for your wife to know what to go from there. And that she'll continue to give them that drive to do that. These kids nowadays, God forbid their parents, and you know, sometimes I bring that up too. God forbid, I'd be like, what happens if your parents die tomorrow? What are you going to do? You rely on them so much, but yet you complain.
Yeah.
But God forbid they no longer exist. What's gonna be next?
Well, like when you're talking about that example, right? Like, hey, you're the smartest person because everyone else is the dumbest person. That's kind of how it is right now to be driven. Like you're kind of driven because everyone else is not driven. So if you have just like the smallest little drive, you look like phenomenal. Like
You're surpassing everybody.
yeah,
You're
like
surpassing
people think
everybody.
I'm disciplined. It's like, dude, I just wake up at a certain time. I do certain things. I don't do that much. Like that's very disciplined. But if you're not disciplined, to you, that's very disciplined, right? To me, that's not very disciplined. It's normal. You wake up at a certain time. You have a certain thing. You have a certain time you eat. You do this one. Hey, I don't want to eat pizza today, even though it's my daughter could eat it. I'm not doing it. Why? I'm disciplined, but to me, it's not that big of a deal. But to somebody who sees that, they're like, dude, that's the craziest shit in the world, man. Like, how do you do it? You know what I mean? So I think it's the same way with being driven. It's like I might appear to be driven, but that's just only because you're so undriven that to you it seems like this is impossible. But to me,
that's
it's like,
the key.
yeah,
That's the key. Surround yourself with people who are not driven. You're gonna go places.
But real talk though, man, like if you want to be successful, sometimes being successful isn't that hard, man. Sometimes being successful is just not being a fucking loser. Like it's like simple. It's like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, a very simple thing, right? Like, hey, I don't want to be fat. Well, don't fucking eat. Like simple shit. Like, well, I don't fucking eat cheeseburgers. That's it. I'm not even asking you to be like 6-pack abs. I'm just saying don't eat fucking cheeseburgers every day, fucker.
Put the White Castle down, homie. Yeah. Put the White Castle down.
But sometimes, though, that's the crazy part. It is that simple. Like, everybody makes everything so fucking difficult. Sometimes, what do you got to do to be great? I got to read one book a day or one book a year. I'm that much better than I was the year before. That's how simple it is. And so, like, what I've been talking to some people, and I'm like, hey, let's go over goals, right? Let's go over goals. I'm like, hey, your goal right now is to do this tomorrow. And after you've done that tomorrow, your next goal is to do it for 2 days in a row. After that, then we're talking about 3 days in a row. Guess what? You didn't do it for 3 days in a row. That is now 2 days in a row is now your high score. You want to beat that score. That's it. Like, people make shit so fucking difficult. Like, no, man, write a fucking go down and just try to go for it. Even if, like, I have a goal of like 25 audiobooks, and I've never achieved that goal. I don't sit there next year and be like, okay, I guess I don't read books no more. I can't achieve it. I'm just like, well, we'll do 25. Like, but the thing I look at is sitting there saying, well, the first year I did 18. The next year I did 20. The next year I did 22. Okay, it is feasible. I have to get better, right? But I'm getting better every year. So even though I didn't hit my goal, it kind of doesn't fucking matter. The point of the goal was to be better anyway. So, but if you read 0 books and I read 18, I look like a fucking genius and you look like a fucking jackass. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's that simple of just like, well, I didn't reach my goal, but nobody even has a goal. So therefore you're better than everyone else right now. Like, you're good. Right. Have fun.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree with you 100%. It's just like when people tell me, you want coffee? And I'm like, no. And they're like, why? Well, I don't drink coffee. How come? Like, what the fuck? Like, just because I don't drink coffee, am I a bad person? Like, are you gonna look at me like I'm a piece of shit and I'm not worthy to be in your presence anymore? Like, I just never got hooked on coffee. Like, I just don't care for it. Like, I don't need to be caffeinated in the mornings to start my day. I'm sorry that you need it, but I don't need it. But why is that like a mind blown? You know what I'm saying? But it's just funny because every people's homes I go to or whatnot to visit, and they be like, hey, you want some coffee? And I'm like, nope. And it leads, why not? How come? What's wrong with you? Why you don't like coffee? I just don't like fucking coffee. Plain and simple.
Well, I don't like coffee either, but I drink it all the time because of caffeine. I'm like one of those people who's like, do you like this? No. Why? But why do you still do it?
Caffeine junkie.
Because I have caffeine pills. So in the morning, my pre-workout in the morning is a caffeine pill, 200 milligrams of caffeine, and a liquid IV, so electrolytes. So that is my pre-workout, right? It's a very clean pre-workout, and that's why you have that thing. But same thing, people are like, why do you have caffeine pills? Like, oh, because this is my pre-workout. It's like one of those. Sometimes I think people are like, you do this even though you don't
blasphemy.
Like it. Yeah, it's like I can't stand coffee. It's gross. Why do you drink it?
Right.
Because it has caffeine. Like, that's the only. Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, sometimes people are like, I can't believe you do stuff you don't like. Like, yeah, I run every day. I don't fucking like it. That's kind of the point of like what makes it better. And so it's kind of like if you turn it back and be like, can you imagine, man, if you did stuff you didn't like every day? Like, you would be better in life because honestly, and that's some real shit too, though. doing things you don't like, but knowing it's good for you, is actually going to make you better, like a success. And people will think you're fucking crazy. You know, when
Right,
people are like,
right,
when people find out I hate to run, they're like, but you're about to run a half marathon. I'm like, yeah, why? I want to push myself. I want to, like, I need to do things I don't like to do. Why?
right.
Because there's going to be a time where I want to get better, but it's hard. Well, you got to keep going. So I'm training my mind in that sense. A little bit fucking probably crazy for that shit, right? But you kind of appear like you're greater than everybody else because they're not willing to do that. So by default, you're like, hey, you're driven. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm driven, but in a sense, I'm just doing what I've always done, and just I just build upon it
Yeah,
little by little, and next thing you know, you're driven, right? But it didn't start driven. It started by just doing like, let me do one thing I don't like. Let me not eat a
right.
fucking Twinkie. I would love to do that, but I'm gonna do something I don't like to do, which is say no.
Yeah, it's just like how you take the pre-workouts, but yet I don't see you working out. So,
Again, man, that's good. That's good, man. I'm happy for that. You know what I mean? Because again, like I've said before, I don't care, man. Like I'm working out. I work out for
hold on,
me.
hold on. Let me ask you this: why? I don't know. I don't know why you do group outings. I really don't know why you go out with any of your coworkers or anything. Because apparently they love taking pictures. But every time I see one of those pictures posted, it's like Where's Waldo. Like I gotta find you because I see everybody else smiling.
Yeah.
But then when I look for Mike, just look for fucking Michael Myers, and you will find Mike staying. And it's always in the back.
Yep.
You're never in the front.
Nope.
Never in the middle. You're always in the back, and it's always one of those like your
It's
head is
it's the
just
same
slightly
facial
leaning
expression.
out. It is. It is.
It's the same thing. I'm
It's like
like,
Halloween over and over again. Michael Myers every time.
yeah.
Give a smile, a little smirk. You can't
You'll see it here
nothing.
because you're making me laugh. Like that's why. But
No smile, no
nah,
nothing.
like
I need to see some of that.
you know why though? Because I don't want to fucking be there. Like I'm there out of obligation. I swear to fucking God, I don't like people, man. Like you know,
Dude, I would so Photoshop a smile on you just to put it.
they
Just
started
to, and I
they
would
started
put
putting me
one.
in different things. Like they started saying I was like the Rock, like a joke of the Rock. So I'm now that's my
Yeah.
photo of like a picture of him with a fanny pack and the shorts. So it's kind of funny, but it's like one of those things. It's like I don't like people. I
Yeah,
don't like
yeah,
going out. I'm going out because I'm obligated. There, I was at a place, right, and so it's
yeah.
kind of like a social event for investors. And so we're there. I'm at a table. I don't know some of these people. I just got up and left and went to the people I did know and just started talking to them. And it's kind of like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I don't want to know you right now. I don't care to get to know you.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm gonna go over here, and that's it. I'm only here out of obligation. I'm not here because I want to be. I don't care to know you.
Oh my god.
It's a 9:30. I would be in getting ready for bed right now. Like I'm missing sleep. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I'm not that
Oh
person.
man, I just wish people who know you, they're listening. Go look at Mike's
Yeah,
Mike's work group photos. Those shits
same.
are so funny,
It's the
man. It
same.
is the same.
It's the
It is
same.
the
Like
same.
it's same thing with family photos. They're like, you don't
Yeah,
smile.
yeah.
Like I don't smile anywhere. It's not personal. I just don't
Right.
care. Like my every photo, they're like, you look the same in every photo and every ID picture. I'm like, it's the same facial expression. There's
Yeah,
no
it's
fucking
funny.
soul left in behind these eyes. I don't care. I'm not gonna
He's
smile.
not driven, people. He's not driven.
Not to be there by no means. No. Like especially the worst part is when someone's talking to you and you're like, dude, I honestly, you're wasting my time in life right now. Like you look at people and you're like, bro, I'm actually wasting my time in life right now. I
Oh
have
shit.
not gained nothing from this conversation, but to know I should not
Right.
probably talk to you ever again. Like
That's
that sucks,
funny.
right? Like, but it's actually how I think of my side on a lot of people. I don't want to
That's
deal with
good
them.
stuff. That's good stuff right there.
All right, well, I stop
Oh
recording on that
man.
note.
All right. Let's do it.